So I'm doing the U.S.-China trade relation and the WTO. The WTO stands for the World Trade Organization, and it's the only global international organization that deals with the rules of trade between nations. And it operates on a global system of trade rules and acts as a forum for negotiating trade agreement. The WTO ensures that trade flows as smoothly, predictably, and freely as possible. It aims to open trade for the benefit of all, and it settles disputes between its members and supports the needs of developing countries. So the WTO follows a set of free trade principles, and the first one is trade without discrimination, which means that countries cannot normally discriminate between their trading partners. Freer trade, which happens gradually through negotiation by lowering trade barriers, and predictability through binding and transparency, because with stability and predictability, investment is encouraged, jobs are created, consumers can fully enjoy the benefits of competition, choice, and lower prices. Also promoting fair competition by tariffs and other forms of protection in limited circumstances only, encouraging development and economic reform, because developing countries need flexibility in the time they take to implement the systems agreements. So the WTO has a pretty straightforward dispute process. During the first 60 days, they have consultations and mediation. For the next 45 days, there's a panel that's set up and the panelists are appointed. And then for a 6-month period after that, the final panel reports to the parties. And then 3 weeks after that, the panel reports to WTO members. And then for a final 60 days, if there's no appeal, the dispute settlement body adopts the report. If there is an appeal, that's given a maximum of 90 days for the appeals report, and then an additional 30 days for the dispute settlement body to adopt the appeals report, for a total of 1 year and 3 months with an appeal and a total of 1 year without an appeal. The WTO appeal is a 60 to 90 day process, and either side can appeal a panel's decision or ruling, but appeals have to be based on points of law such as legal interpretation and cannot re-examine existing evidence or examine new issues. Each appeal is heard by three members of a permanent 7-member appellate body set up by the dispute settlement body, and the appeal can either uphold, modify, or reverse the panel's legal findings and conclusions. So there's a post-panel decision process, and it can go one of two ways. After the implementation, they're given a reasonable amount of time, and there can either be a dispute over the implementation or retaliation. And in cases of non-implementation, parties negotiate compensation pending full implementation, which I'll show you something similar happened in one of the specific cases between the United States and China. But the economic relationship between the U.S. and China, the relationship supports roughly 2.6 million jobs in the U.S., and China purchased $165 billion worth of goods and services from the United States in 2015, which represented 7.3% of all our U.S. exports and about 1% of total U.S. economic output. China was the United States' 11th largest export market in 2000, but they've grown to be our 3rd largest destination for our goods and services. When the economic benefits generated from U.S. investment in China and vice versa, they create $216 billion worth of GDP. So there have been more WTO disputes between the U.S. and China than any other two countries. China's filed 10 disputes against the United States, and the United States has filed 21 disputes against China. And these types of cases are the most popular. The definitive safeguard measures, countervailing, anti-dumping, measures affecting imports, tax measures, and subsidies. So this is a specific case between the United States and China. It was a solar panel subsidies case, in which the U.S. filed a dispute concerning China's subsidizing of solar panel manufacturing. They claim that the Chinese government was unfairly subsidizing Chinese solar panel manufacturers to enable those companies to sell their products at below market prices and drive U.S. competitors out of the market. The U.S. government decided to institute even stricter tariffs against Chinese-made solar products, But some in the industry said that the government's decision to implement these new tariffs was counterproductive to its own environmental, employment, and manufacturing goals. They argued that the government's position made it harder for the solar companies to compete globally. China's been known to devalue their currency, which is known as currency manipulation. They haven't been doing it in years, but even if they were, the law targeting manipulators requires that the U.S. would spend over a year negotiating before it could even retaliate. And even if they do retaliate, it would be hard to find jurisdiction in the WTO, and the policies that they would have to enact against China could be counterproductive to their business in the United States. But for the WTO to gain jurisdiction over currency manipulation, they could do one of two things to gain this. The first would be for a country to show that the currency manipulating country was in violation of the GATT, also known as the GATT, or a country would have to convince a judge that the currency manipulation presents an unfair de facto trade subsidy as it props up its own manufacturing interests. So, as a summary, just to wrap things up, the WTO is an international organization, the only one that deals with rules of trade between nations. China has grown to be the third largest destination for American goods and services, and that trade relationship between the United States and China supports roughly 2.6 million jobs in the U.S. And there was a specific case, WTO dispute, that the U.S. filed against the Chinese, claiming that the government unfairly subsidizes Chinese solar panels, and they were able to sell their products at below market prices, which drives the U.S. out of business. Appreciate you for watching and listening. Thank you.